In this video, I'm going to go through how to create an STB file for a black background. When I created my standards, I realized I kind of hung everyone out to dry, that is people that don't use a white background. I left you with a STB file that's suitable only for a white background, and then most people are unfamiliar with STB files. Most people use the CTB file, right? So for a few different reasons, I won't have time to make the black background version of my template. I'm not too worried about that because it's very likely that you'll create your own layers with your own colors anyway, so this is stuff you'll have to know how to do regardless. But I thought I'd do a quick demo on how to create an STB file suitable for use with a black background. Okay, so first I'm going to go through some notes and tips I've prepared. So first, I'm just going to let you know this guide, it does outline a carefully thought out process, but if you find a better way, go ahead and do that. But at least this will give you a good foundation, a good basis for what we're doing. Number two, yes, it's a pain, but in my opinion, creating and editing a CTB file is worse. You can, however, still achieve similar or exactly the same results depending on what you're doing with a CTB file. For me, I just find the STB files working a lot better, and the only thing stopping me from using the STB file was familiarity. Okay, so number three, it's always prudent to create backup files. Do a save as. Don't overwrite your existing DWG file. Especially if you get interrupted in the middle of this, you're going to be changing layer colors and whatnot, so you got to be careful with that. And the same goes when you're creating a new STB file, and you'll see how to create a new separate STB file as we move forward. Okay, so number four, similar to above, you're going to be switching between a white and black background. So what you should do is make sure you have profiles for dark and light backgrounds preset. I have mine here. What you do is you just go to add to list. Now if I wanted to overwrite one of these, what I do is I go to rename. I'd put something after it, just any character. I'll cancel out of that, and then when I go to add to list, I just retype out the name. I guess it would be also quicker if I just went to rename, Control C. You get the point. Anyways, if you switch your profile or your display colors, it's a pain in the butt to have to go in here and constantly change them back and forth. So this is really important, I guess, is to make sure you have your profiles saved. So my note number 5 here, this is the actual reason I've been holding off on creating this STB file. So when you create new styles in your STB file, they don't auto sort, and there's no way to sort them after they're created. So there's a few ways around this. You could preload the STB file with a bunch of styles, and therefore you can just place things where you need them and delete any of the gaps that are left over. Also, if your STB file is disorganized, it's not a big deal because you're generally only going to be modifying these things on occasion. It's not something you're going to be working with constantly, like switching between layers and whatnot. So it's not a big deal, but when I do create this, I want to know what I'm doing, where I'm going with it. I want it to be nice, organized, and sorted, at least to start off with. And thereafter, when I make changes to it, I don't care too much. But yeah, so point number 5 is probably the biggest holdup as to why I haven't released the version of my template that you'd use with a black background. Okay, so number 6. This is not a full tutorial on using STB files, but it might be enough to teach you everything you need to know. Now, converting an existing drawing from a CTB file to an STB file is fairly easy, but unintuitive. There's a few steps that you probably wouldn't guess on your own. You probably have to go to Autodesk Help and dig that up on the internet. There's a lot of demand. I'll make a video on how to do that. You only need to do that if you're taking a file that currently has a CTB file, plot style file applied to it, and converting it to an STB file. But if you're using my templates or you started with a template that has an STB file, then you won't even need to do that step. But anyways, ask me in the comments. That's one thing I'm not covering in this video. And the last thing I want to mention is that colors with a luminance set to or close to 50 won't need their own plot style created for them. Call those freebies. Now keep that in mind if you're making your own template and you don't want to fuss around with this and don't really care about the colors. If you set the luminance to your for your colors, you got to go to the true colors tab and you'll see that, right? To 50, the color is, aside from obviously bright yellow, which I avoid using with a white background, the color's going to look pretty close regardless of the background color, unless you obviously go to some of the extremes. I guess cyan, of course, would be really light as well. But yeah, aside from the lightest colors, like for example, red is probably going to look similar regardless of your background color. Anyway, so enough on that. Just keep that in mind, and it'll make more sense as we get further into this tutorial. Okay, now I'll outline my process quickly. I have 4 steps here. Don't worry if you don't understand them. They'll make way more sense once we get into this. So number 1, I start out with a white background. You can do the same thing if you're using the print preview or even print test pages or whatever, but I found it way easier to do this using a white background. But yeah, for some people, maybe you don't want to create your profile. That's fine. You just have to do it with the print preview or whatever, right? Okay, so number 2, this is important. We'll create our plot styles. And now for someone who's used to using a STB file, where the colors are essentially the plot styles, this will make a lot more sense in a few minutes. STB file is a night and day difference, how you set it up. But yeah, you'll know what we're doing in a few minutes here. But it's important, we got to reference the color name in the plot style, and the color name will be what I call the plot color, and we'll eventually change the layers color to what I'll refer to as the display color. So the color we reference in the plot style will be the color which we want that plot style to plot in, if that makes sense. Okay, so 3, you'll apply the newly created plot style to each layer. And the rest of this is just stuff I already covered. So we'll move on to number 4, which is adjusting the layer's color to a suitable display color. My method of doing that is using luminance, so I'll show you all about that in just a few minutes here. So I'll go into my layers, and I've created some, I got all my templates layers in here, but we're just going to ignore those. And I have all these layers I've already made. So I'll just leave this open for just a little bit here, just so you can more or less copy these layers. Don't worry about the line weight. So the only properties we're going to worry about right now are the color and the plot style. Okay, so I'm going to go to Control P. So I already have a STB file, so I'm going to go in there. If I did that too quickly, I'll go back there. So I'm just clicking this right here. If your dialog looks like this, just find this little button down here. Okay, so I'll go back into here. And yeah, I just have a very simple STB file, and for my template, since I'm using the white background, my display color for each layer is my plot color, and that's key. When we switch to a black background, I find that for my eyes, contrast is what makes me think a line is darker or lighter, right? And we'll demonstrate that with the gray colors in just a short time here. But anyways, since with the white background, you really only need a couple plot styles. So I have normal, which just more or less uses the layer properties, unless the object itself is overridden, to dictate how that object is plotted. So that is super easy. So I have created my own style, which is normal with butt end. And all this has is a different line end style. And this means that instead of rounding the edge or, sticking it out or something, it just stops nice and short so that things like hidden lines or dashed lines where the spaces are close together appear much, much better. They don't bleed or blend together like they would with a round end. And then I have a wipeout layer that overrides the plot color. Now I don't really need to use that with a white background. I guess I should say my background is off-white, so my wipeout layer is just white, and I can see it, since I have the grid here as well, I can see that wipeout layer quite easily. So anyways, to add a plot style, and this could be any sort of plot style, you just click add style, and now from here I could choose my object end style. I could use object color, or I could change it. I believe you have the line weight and everything in here, but things like line weight, line type, and with a white background color, I use the layer properties to dictate that. So anyways, we'll do a save as, and I'm going to call this demo STB file. So I already have a test in there. I've practiced this once, and okay, so we're finally ready to get going on this, get into the meat and bread of this tutorial. So I'm just going to copy this over here, and I go to options again, go into those profiles. So the whole point of this, I guess, is how my brain works personally. I think a lot of other people are like this as well. If I'm staring at this, the black background, the contrast between this gray and the background is greater than this one. So I would expect this to print more faintly than this. So with the white background, that's not a problem. What you see is what you get. But for people that prefer the black background, you might feel the same way as me. You might benefit from adjusting your colors, or what I like to call decoupling the display color from the actual plot color. So with grays, it's quite intuitive, quite easy. I notice when I go to the black background, these two colors, color 252 and 251, end up looking virtually identical. I don't know what that's about, but it's something to do with AutoCAD. But the blues, they're a little less intuitive in that this light blue, would you want it to print similar to this dark blue? For me, the answer is yes, because when well, for example, with my template, I do all my annotations in a dark blue. So if I'm working with a black background, I want all the annotations and such to stand out, to be really bright, to separate themselves from other components. So I'd either use possibly even cyan or yellow for my annotations, but I wouldn't obviously want it to print. If you printed yellow annotations on a white page, I don't think you'd be making any friends for people that actually have to use your drawings. So for me, I'd like a blue like this to be my display color, but to actually print as a dark blue. Then for medium blue, that could pretty much, to be honest, it could pretty much stay the same regardless of your background color. Okay, so I'm going to go Control P to get into my print preview. So in case that part of the dialog's not showing, just find this little button. I'm going to click this right here. I already have my STB file that I've included with the template. I'm going to click this. First thing I'm going to do is a save as. I'm going to name my new file just demo STB file. Click save. I'm going to briefly explain this, but there's not much to it. If you're using a white background, you can get away with a very basic STB file. A short way of describing it is that the layer properties, if the object's not overridden, basically drive the appearance of the object when it's plotted. And that's what this normal plot style does. Now you can create individual plot styles that override certain properties. Here I have the line end style changed to the but, and the reason for that is I find that with hidden lines or any line style that has short gaps, if you use rounded edges, the default, it tends to bleed those gaps together and you can barely tell it's a hidden line, especially from far away, or depends a lot on your plotter as well. So basically that means that if I have a plot style, I also have to create a custom plot style for any colors that use hidden lines or center lines and stuff like that. Bit of a pain, but well worth it in the end. And then I have this style for wipeouts, which overrides the color and adds screening. So when I'm using a white background, my background's actually slightly off-white, so I can get away with my wipeouts just plotting white. I can just use this normal plot style, but I've changed the plot style to wipeouts just in case I decide to override the layer color. So this is the plot color, but I'll just go into layers quick just to make sure we're nice and clear on that. I'll go find that wipeout layer. So yeah, I have the plot style set to wipeouts. So even if I do decide to change this color, like maybe some identifiable color that really helps my brain clue in that this is a wipeout, I can do that and get away with it because I have my plot style set to that wipeouts that will plot white no matter what this color is set to. So one thing we can actually do is get to that dialog by, going to your plot style column in your layers dialog, clicking here and going to editor. But one thing I want to do before going too far here is I'm going to hit Control P again. I'm going to switch this to that demo STB file. You don't want to overwrite, if you have a STB file for a white background, you don't want to overwrite it. You want to make sure you're doing your changes to your new STB file. Okay, anyways, with all that out of the way, we're finally going to create our first style. I'm going to name this Gray 254, and you'll see what that's all about just in a few seconds here. For all these styles we create, I'm going to reference the color in the name of the file. So I make sure I got my demo STB file, not my other one. I'm going to go save and close. Not that it would matter, it would just clutter your STB file with plot styles that you might not use. So don't worry too much about that. Even if I accidentally edited this one, I can always delete the styles and stuff. But anyways, let's go back. Click yes there. Click cancel. We're not wanting to print right now. We'll go to layer. So here's color. The layer I have named color 254, but any layer that was using that color in my template, I'd also switch this plot style here to this new one we created. So, okay, we got that. So now, by applying that plot style that specifies the color it plots as, we've decoupled the layer's display color from its plot color. So I'm going to go here. I have 254, the same color as my plot style selected, right? I'm going to go to true color. And a really good representation, or the varying contrast between a white and black background relative to the color you're using, is the luminance. So we're up at 80 right now, so 100 is the max value, right? So 100 minus 80 is 20, which is, I guess, kind of sort of the opposite value. So this dark gray on a black background will have similar, if not the same, contrast as this color on a white background. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve here. So I'm going to set that down to 20. And that is the basic process of creating a display color that looks good on a black background, that's decoupled from your plot color. And for me, it gives my brain a good representation of what my drawing's going to print like, even when I'm using a black background. Okay, so I'm going to click here. I'm going to go back into the editor. Now I'm going to stop the video here. I'm going to do the same thing for the other gray colors, but yeah, I'm going to stop the video and record it sped up to save you time. Okay, so I've got all those completed. I also found a weird quirk. So my index colors, pay attention to these red, green, blue values that appear just up here. So notice that color 251 has red, green, blue of 51, 51, 51, and color 252 has 102, 102, 102. So cancel out of that. I'll go to Options, Dark Background, click OK, go to Layer, and go back into that Colors dialog. And now they're virtually the same, so it actually changes the red, green, blue value of these two colors. But anyways, I'll go Cancel. So that's something you'll just have to handle, and to get rid of any confusion, you could just use the true color values. And we'll get into that with the blues here in just a minute. But yeah, just pay attention to that. So what I've done here is I've just used the luminance as if I had the white background active. Okay, so anyways, we have all this set up. So our color 251 is now not displaying as color 251, but it will print. So darker to lighter, right? So it'll print as that shade of gray. So this will print the faintest, this will print the darkest. And that's how I like to work when I'm using a black background. I'll go back into that print preview one more time. Okay, so now I'm gonna pause the video again and do the blues the same way. Just speed up the video, no sound, and you can just watch how I do it. Okay, so I finished the blue plot styles. I've left blue, the medium blue alone, because this actually, let's go into layer. This color is pretty much 50 luminance. So there's really not much point in messing around with it unless you have a personal preference. So I'll go into the plot style just to show you how I name these. So I basically describe the color and then write out the name. I have to use dashes because you can't put commas in the names of these. And just override that color with whatever I want that plot color to be, which should match this, obviously. So in a nutshell, that's basically my system. Then of course I just go here and adjust the colors. So I'll do a print preview. Go back and forth just so you can see what's going on here. So this is, the gray is pretty straightforward, but with other colors and stuff, it is really going to come down to personal preference. One last thing I wanted to tack on to the end of this video was just to show you how and why I create plot styles for any layer containing hidden lines. So I've just made a layer here. The line type is hidden 2. Made the line weight nice and thick just so I can really illustrate the topic here. And I've already created a plot style, which is light blue dash hidden, and it's just the same color as that other blue. Okay, so I'll go into the editor. I'll scroll to the end here. So other than this plot style, the only difference here is the but end. So I'm going to change that to round. I'm going to go to save and close. Click OK, just to show you why I create these extra plot styles. So I'll do that. I'll do an F1 so I can get that there. So as you can see here, the line bleeds together. There's no fixing the appearance of it, but also when I print, the gaps in the hidden line aren't really that well defined. So I'm going to go back into the STB file. Round is going to be the default. So if you don't, if you just use the object end style, it's going to be round, right? We're going to go to but. We're going to save and close. Go back into our print preview. Now you can see that with the but end, those gaps in the line are much more well defined. So as you can see, it's quite a process, but remember, dealing with CTB files is quite a process in itself, and I've had a lot of little problems caused from CTB files. Once I learned how to use STB files, I did find them easier, but yeah, if the CTB file is working for you, continue to use it, but for me, if I can use an STB file, I will. So anyways, I'm going to go back into here. The one reason, probably the one thing holding me back from creating my plot style for my templates and getting the black background version of those templates ready is the fact that once you create all of these, you can't really rearrange them. You're basically stuck with the order you create them in. I've got a few workarounds for that. One would be to add a bunch of styles, right? And then you can just edit these ones, leave these as gaps if you need to insert something in there, right? But it's once you create this, you won't be able to rearrange it, I guess is what I'm getting at. But yeah, it's not a big problem because you're only going to be editing this on occasion. It's not like you're changing layers or looking for a layer in this list or whatever, right? So not a huge deal, but when I do create my STB file, I want to make sure at least the starting point is nice and well organized. And of course, you guys are probably going to have your own layers, your own colors and all that, so you'll probably have to do this anyways. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully it's not too much of a hassle, too much work, but I'd say if you take the time to do it, create a nice looking appearance for when you're drafting that gives a good depiction of what you're actually going to plot. It's well worth the time. So with that said, thanks very much for watching.